I do the communications and marketing for AdventureTripr, as well as for another local organization. And I spend pretty much every single weekend outside hiking. It's, or at least it averages out to about every weekend. I think I'm at 39 hikes this year. And I have another like 7 hikes planned for a week-long vacation in October. So I try to get outside a lot. It's a fun way to work out. Good things to see. So yeah, I'm passionate about working for AdventureTripr because it's a cool organization that helps people get outside and makes the outdoors more accessible, which I always love because it gives more advocates for the outdoors. And so in case you didn't know, AdventureTripr is like it's an adventure platform to help you find trips if you're busy, you don't know the area, you've got kids, you don't have time to plan something. It's a good way to get to book something that's already planned for you with some specifications or some requests that you have and get your outdoors thing. And so with the idea of making the outdoors more accessible for everyone, we've been hosting these video chats on different topics. And tonight is Gear 101. So that's why we brought in Nate as our guest speaker to talk about gear. And so now I'm gonna let Nate introduce himself.
Cool. Hi, I am Nate, and I'm the one that will be getting grilled today by Spencer. So a little bit about me. I grew up in the Midwest, Illinois specifically, but I've been living here in Washington for about 6 years now. I was in the Army for 15 years, which is how I originally came to this area, and I loved it so much that I decided to leave the Army. I am a current student at the University of Washington, and I'm working on getting my degrees in history and teaching right now, although remotely. So I'm actually sitting here in Zoom every day. On the side, I work with companies and organizations to provide photos and written content and instructing people on how to get outside safely. I spend every weekend and some weekdays in the mountains, whether it be like day hiking, backpacking, mountaineering, backcountry skiing, just about any sort of sport in the mountains. If it's in the mountains, I'm going to enjoy it. I enjoy sharing the outdoors by giving back to the communities that have helped me. I was trained by the mountaineers and like the alpine climbing stuff. So after I was trained, I helped them in turn to train the next crop of students to get outside in the technical mountains safely. And I still help the mountaineers now, but it's mostly on like the marketing side by giving them photos and written content. I also give back to our national parks, by raising money and donating prints and images to organizations like the Washington's National Park Fund. And I've also started helping get fellow veterans outside. I think that getting outdoors is incredibly important for both your physical and your mental health, and veterans in particular could really benefit from that. One of those organizations is called Veterans Expeditions, and early next year, fingers crossed, that if the world is back to normal-ish, I hope to teach an intro to volcanoes course with a bunch of veterans and show them how to get up some of the easier volcanoes like Mount St. Helens and Adams and Mount Hood. And I'm also working on a personal project right now, which is called the Olympic Mountain Project, and it's a goal to summit 30 mountains in the Olympic National Park. And that's about it.
Yeah, so we're excited to have Nate tonight. I found him on Instagram. We'll tell you the link to his website later, but also check out his Instagram because it's really awesome, fun person to follow. And with that, we'll start in a second. So if you guys have any questions during this that you want us to try to answer at the end, you can send them in via chat. So we'll get to the ones we can, and if we haven't covered everything during it. And so with that, we'll start with Gear 101. Sorry about that. So with COVID, obviously you guys have probably noticed more people are outside because we can't be inside. So lots more people have turned to like hiking, camping, backpacking, fishing, etc. And that's why we wanted to kind of talk more about like basic gear. So that's kind of why we started this, to make sure everyone gets outside safely and comfortably. And just because there's more to going outside than just throwing on some jeans and a cotton t-shirt. And so like, I know my first hike, my first big hike was 12 miles. We weren't expecting snow. We hit snow. I was in cheap tennis shoes and cotton sweats. And now I look back at, wow, that was a really bad idea, but I didn't know it at the time. So like something like this would have helped me. So I'm going to Nate talk to us about what clothes should we wear when hiking.
Yeah, so I think we've all made that mistake of wearing cotton on, one of our first times going outdoors, and you find out really quick why that's not the proper choice to wear. Like in the Army, we actually had a phrase that cotton kills, and that is true. Like it will, if you are caught unprepared in really bad weather, it can lead to some pretty bad stuff. So the two main types of fabrics that we want to wear when it comes to like outdoor clothing are either on the natural side, you've got like your performance wools. So specifically like a merino wool is going to be great, especially in wintertime conditions. And then there's also like your synthetic stuff, which most of you think of as polyester. That's kind of like your gym clothes type of stuff. It's like what I'm wearing right now, where it's moisture wicking and it's not going to trap that sweat on your body. It's going to absorb it and then and then dry. So that's kind of the two main things that you need to be aware of with like the actual clothing material. I personally tend to wear more merino wool in the winter time because I get more wet in the winter, and it's not because the snow is on me or anything like that because I'm wearing a shell, but it's because you're sweating really hard and it's not really going anywhere. And merino kind of acts as like a little wetsuit where it traps that moisture next to your body, but then like your body heat warms it up. And then in the summertime, I tend to wear more technical synthetic fabrics just because they breathe really well. The other main thing with outdoor clothing is that it's always in layers. So there's three main layers that you want to wear. That's your base layers, your insulation, and your shells. So a base layer is pretty much anything that is next to your skin. That's exactly what I was talking about with like the merino wool or the synthetic stuff. It's next to your skin, it's your base layer, it's always on no matter what. And then your insulation layer is something like this, where it's like a jacket, maybe filled with down, either synthetic or goose down or something like that. And that's what you put on to keep your body heat in, because that's not, a base layer is not very good at that. And then when we're talking about shells, we're talking about the main name that people will think of is Gore-Tex. And that's like your technical, kind of like hard, almost like plasticky feeling jackets and pants and stuff like that. And that's what actually keeps the precipitation off of you, whether that's rain or it's snow, or even just blocking wind. If it's really, really windy, that will sap the heat out of you really quick. So when you're choosing what to wear and when you're packing for a day hike, no matter what the temperature says, you need to have one of all three of those. Your base layer is typically just whatever you happen to be wearing when you're hiking. Insulation layer, and how thick it'll be will depend on the season. I don't bring the same insulated jacket for the winter time as I would for the summer, but I always have an insulated jacket of some type. It could be anything from as thin as a fleece jacket to one of those big giant Michelin Man puffy things. And then always bring a shell. And again, the shell kind of will depend on the season. And there's some really, really lightweight ones that you can wear that weigh just a few ounces. And I, might bring those in the summertime when, I'm not expecting too much precipitation. And then you have some really, the term that we use is like bomb-proof, ones, and those are kind of like your more burly, thick ones that you might see at like a ski resort and stuff like that.
Cool. But what about goes on your feet? Because I don't think there's 3 layers on your feet. I mean, there can't be, but
yeah. Well, actually, so there can be if you include like a sock liner, your sock, and your shoe. But
I've definitely worn at least 2 pairs of socks with my boots. So
yeah, that's one trick to avoid blisters that some people find. I use this in the Army quite a bit, where you have like a really thin sock liner first, and then your actual hiking sock over that, and that reduces the friction between your foot and the boot.
Yeah.
typically these days I just wear one sock, and if I'm concerned about blisters, I'll put some blue go tape on my heel. But I'm not. My feet are so destroyed from just being out all the time that they never blister. Um, but yeah, so like the main two types of footwear would be like a shoe and a boot. Um, so so like a shoe is this right here, and it's kind of just like a normal, like a tennis shoe type of thing. And then a boot is just the same thing, but with higher support on the ankle. Ultimately, I'm going to start this off by saying that this comes down to personal preference, because footwear is such a personal choice. There are some universal truths about them though. So with wearing a hiking boot, some of the pros of wearing a boot is that they are much longer lasting than a shoe. They will, you can have a good boot for years and years, and they are very supportive and stable. They're typically much more weatherproof, especially if you have a nice like leather one. Some cons of boots is that they are heavier, and that long hikes you can definitely start to feel that, and they may also be uncomfortable at first, especially if they're pretty stiff. Now, with a hiking shoe, sometimes they're also called trail runners, but don't be fooled by that name. Like just because you have a pair of trail runners on, like these are considered trail runners, but I promise you, I don't actually run in these. You can just hike. But the benefits of having something like a trail runner is that they are very lightweight. So it doesn't cost as much energy to lift each foot. They dry quickly if you did accidentally wade through a creek. They're very comfortable. But then the cons with a trail shoe is that they're not as stable and supportive as the boot. They wear out much more quickly, and they're not as friendly in the snow and rain, because they just typically can't repel the water that much, and they're also just much shorter. So if you're hiking in snow, the snow is going to get in the inside, especially if you're not wearing a pair of gaiters. So those are kind of the main differences, the main pros and cons. For new hikers, again, it's all about personal fit, but I would suggest that they look at boots first, because even if you decide that you like trail runners, you'll probably end up needing both anyway. I don't know too many people who go into the mountains who have only one or the other. They typically have several pairs of footwear because there are so many different conditions. If a trail is very uneven and rocky and muddy, even if it's just a day hike, I'm going to wear a pair of boots because I want that extra support. But if I know that the trail I'm going on is a pretty well cared for, nice flat dirt path, I'm going to stick with a lighter weight shoe. So it's really kind of just dependent on the conditions of where you are.
Cool. And then do you have a favorite item of clothing you bring out?
So it kind of depends, but right now I would say my favorite piece of clothing is a buff. And so the buff is actually, that's a brand name. It is basically a neck gaiter is what it is. It's just a tube cloth that you put around your neck. But I'd say this is my favorite because especially right now with COVID, it is like if you're passing somebody and you cannot maintain that 6 feet of distance, this acts as kind of like my mask. I'd pull it up over my mask while passing somebody on the trail if we can't get over. But in normal non-COVID-19 times, this is also very versatile because it can serve a lot of different uses. It's in the summertime, it is a great sweat wiper. In fact, I won't even wear it around my neck in the summer because it's just too warm. So I'll actually wrap it around my wrist. And it's a great like wiping the sweat off of your face. And then in the winter time, it's a great neck and face warmer, especially if you're somebody like myself that has short hair, so you need that wind protection. It can also be a sunblock, if you're not putting on as much sunscreen as you should be doing. And then when camping, it can be just like I use it as a towel, just like wipe down my pots and my spork and stuff like that when after I'm done eating. So it is a very useful. And in a really hot day, sometimes when passing a stream, I will just dunk this in the stream and then just use it as like a cool rag to wipe on your face every now and then. It's probably the most useful piece of clothing.
No, they are useful. I know I have a couple, and there was a pattern, a cute pattern last winter I really liked. So I went to go buy it the other day, going, okay, I have to wear a buff all the time hiking now because of COVID. And they were sold out. I was like, darn it. I finally got to buy the really cute one. And it's
Yeah.
no longer made. So different color for me, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the other kind of cool thing about them is that, oh my gosh, they come in all different colors and patterns, so you can really kind of accessorize.
Like the color really doesn't matter, but it matched my pink hat. So that's why I wanted it. But maybe next year I'll buy a different one.
Right, right.
So we've talked about like what goes on your body, but what goes in a pack? Because you see most hikers out there are carrying a backpack, and so what's in it?
Right, yeah, and so when the pack, when we're talking about the pack, we're usually talking just to like talk about the pack itself. For a day hiking, we're usually in the range of like 20 liters to no more than 40 liters. That's typically how the measurements of packs are divided up. And so what should go in them is the 10 essentials. You may have heard of that. That's been around, that concept of the 10 essentials have been around for a very long time. Although there is two different versions. There's a much older version and it has things on there, like two of the things, like one is fire starter, and then another one is matches. And I don't know how those are not one and the same thing. But anyway, so the new version of the 10 essentials, I'll go through them first and then kind of like talk about each one individually. But it is first navigation, headlamp, sun protection, first aid, knife, fire, shelter, food, water, and extra clothing, the clothing that you're not wearing that's going into your pack. So those are the 10 things. And like before I get into the individual things, that turns off a lot of people right away. They hear that huge list of stuff and then they instantly think there's no way I'm carrying all that. This is a day hike. I'm not carrying 30 pounds of stuff to just go hike for 5 miles. And the thing that I want to drive home first is that like this little tiny quart-sized bag, this weighs 1.5 pounds, and this carries 7 out of my 10 essentials in this tiny little bag. So it does not have to, it sounds like a lot, but it doesn't have to be a lot of stuff. People tend to kind of get freaked out and then just write it off right from the start. But anyway, so going into it, navigation. So this could be anything from, your old school, your map and a compass. I typically don't carry a paper map in the backcountry. I use them for planning stuff ahead of time, but when I'm in the backcountry, I use a combination of two different things. I use one is a GPS watch made by Garmin, which I wear, and then another one is actually my phone, and I use an app called Gaia GPS, and it basically takes those topo maps, and you can download them ahead of time so that you don't need a internet connection or cell phone service or anything like that, and you can have your route mapped out on it and everything, and that's what I use. Although it could be any sort of navigation as long as you have some way of navigating. And then headlamp is the second one. So we say headlamp instead of like a flashlight because if you've ever tried to hike in the dark with a handheld flashlight, you'll realize really quick like why that just doesn't work very well. It's just exhausting holding your hand up like that. So it's much more easy to just wear a headlamp, and also to make sure that you have extra batteries for that headlamp just in case. Or in the case of mine, I have a black diamond headlamp that's really neat. It is a dual use. It's both a USB rechargeable headlamp where I can just plug it into a wall before I go and charge it up, or I can take that battery pack out and put 3 just standard AAAs in there if I forgot to do that. So that's really handy. I like that a lot. And then sun protection. So this is anything like sunglasses, sunscreen, a hat, any sort of sun protective clothes. I'm very fair skinned. I have a lot of freckles thanks to my Irish ancestors. So I typically am wearing a long sleeve hooded shirt even in the summertime. Like this is actually one of them. Has a hood like this. It's very lightweight because this is a lot easier to wear than constantly slathering my arms and neck in sunscreen. So whatever works for this season, as long as you can protect yourself from the sun, and don't forget something like a chapstick, because lips get burnt and that is incredibly uncomfortable when that happens. If you're on snow, even worse places will get burnt that you'd never even thought of, like the inside of your nostrils, or the insides, if you're wearing shorts, the inside of your thighs, because what's happening is that the sun is hitting the snow and it's reflecting and going up. And so it's getting up into areas like, getting this area of your neck burned. It's just the weirdest thing. You can get some really, if you've ever had the inside of your nose sunburned, you'll never forget that experience. You say you've had that happen?
Sounds pretty bad. I've heard the nostril one
Oh.
before. I've never heard the inside of the thighs or the shorts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had that happen several times too. That's why if I'm going to be on the snow for most of the day, I just refuse to wear shorts no matter what, because I'm just, nope.
Yeah.
Okay, and then first aid. So first aid kits, you can get pre-assembled ones at all the outdoor stores like REI and whatnot. I put my own together just because I've been through so many first aid classes that I know what I need in mine, and I know what I don't. But if you're unsure, if you don't have that medical training, just getting a first aid kit that's been put together, by like Adventure Medical Kits or somebody like that you can buy at REI is a great option, as long as you have a first aid kit. Some of the most common items that I find that I'm using constantly in my first aid kit are some sort of painkiller like a Tylenol or an aspirin, some allergy relief like Benadryl, Leukotape or moleskin for blisters, and then also salt tablets, like emergency salt tablets if you are really dehydrated. Those are the things that I feel like I'm constantly replacing in my first aid kit. The next thing is knife. And so with knife, that also includes just anything else that you might need for any sort of repair that you would find in the mountains. So for me, I have this tiny little kit, which was inside of my little bag, and it has a bunch of random things like this tiny little multi-tool. Like multi-tools don't have to be those giant Leathermans or giant Gerbers. This thing weighs like 2 or 3 ounces, and it has everything that you would need on it. It does not have a knife though, because it's TSA friendly, so I can fly with this. So I carry a separate tiny little knife that, again, it just weighs a couple ounces. You don't need, I sometimes see people hiking with like these giant, Bowie knives, these army issued knives like a bayonet or something like that. And you honestly, I cannot imagine the reason why you would need that, unless you're doing like bushcrafting or something like that, in which case yes, you need a very large knife. But for the rest of us, small pocket knives or like a Swiss Army or something like that is going to work really, really well. It's also where I carry my Bic lighter, and then a couple other random things like some nylon cord. This is it's kind of like duct tape. It's called tenacious tape, and this is good for repairing technical fabrics like your Gore-Tex jackets, a tent, in anything like technical fabrics that you most likely will have, or your backpack. Tenacious tape is a really, really good things for getting things out of a pinch. And then I have a couple other random things in here, which are kind of more for like overnight. So a mesh patch if I broke the mesh in my tent, or little patches for my inflatable sleeping pad. If my inflatable sleeping pad suddenly pokes a hole or something like that. So it depends on what sort of gear you're carrying with you, but just think about, what do you have, and what could break, and how would you fix it if it did break? And that's what should go in your knife / first gear first aid kit. Okay, and then shelter. Oh, did you have something, Spencer?
Oh, you're good.
Okay. And then shelter. So this is the one that tends to scare people the most, because they're like, well, am I supposed to carry my tent with me on just a day hike? And the answer is no. So this is my shelter that I carry. It is an emergency bivy sack. It weighs a few ounces. So if you don't know what a bivy sack is, it's essentially like a sleeping bag shaped tube. And what this is just one of those kind of like reflective blankets. You've seen them before, maybe at the end of like a marathon, like people are putting them on, like the runners have them on after they finish the marathon because it's really cold out and they're losing all their body heat. And that's essentially what this is. It's one of those reflective blankets that is in a tube, a sleeping bag shape. And this is meant only for emergencies. If you had an unexpected night out, because like we plan on it being a day hike, but something could happen, and you spend an unexpected night out and you need to stay out there. And I can confirm I've done this. I've spent one night out. It was not for real. It was just for practice. It is not comfortable, but you will survive.
Surviving's always good, even if it's not comfortable.
Yeah, not the most comfortable night of sleep I've ever had. And then the last, and then you have food and water. So food and water are pretty self-explanatory, but bring more than what you think you need. With water, you need to bring either more water than you think you need, or preferably a water filter. And the reason why you would rather bring that is because water is probably the heaviest thing that you're carrying in your pack. So if you only think you need 2 liters of water, and if you carry 4 liters because you think that that's how much extra you need, that's a lot heavier. So it's much better to carry what you think you need plus a water filter. So a water filter can be, there's lots of different types. I use a Be Free, which is just a 1 liter soft bottle that I fill up with water at a stream. And then this is the filter on the inside. So I just fill this up at a stream or lake or wherever, screw this back on, and then as I'm drinking out of it, it is filtering the water. This is what I found to be the easiest style of filter, but there's plenty of others. There's like your traditional pumped ones, or there's iodine tablets, chlorine tablets, lots of different styles. And then the last thing was the extra clothes. And that's kind of what I was talking about before with the taking those extra, make sure you have all 3 layers, hats, gloves, anything that you think you would need if you spent a night unexpectedly on your day hike.
Cool. So I'm gonna do a quick call. Like if anyone has any questions, be sure to send them in by the chat and we'll try to get to them in a couple minutes. So be sure to send those in ASAP. And just to touch back on the water thing, if you're hiking with kids or pets, you have to bring extra for them. And like dogs, for example, like my dog is afraid of if I squirt water, she's afraid. So I have a separate collapsible bowl I bring for her, so I'll dump water from my bottle or my hydration pack into her bowl. So just little things like that. And medical kit, I have some stuff in there for my dog as well, just because she's not a human, so she's got her own special things. So, and with that, let's see, I think we can get to the questions. Let me take a look at what we've got.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, actually first, let's ask Nate, what is your 11th essential?
Oh, okay. So for an 11th essential, I would say I have two answers. One's cheap and one's not so cheap. So the not so cheap one would be this. It's basically just a foam sit pad. In the Pacific Northwest here, the ground is often wet, either from rain or from snow, or just because it's outdoors. And I don't want to sit in that. So this is just a pad that I keep strapped to the outside of my pack. And if I'm sitting down to take a 5-minute breather or 10 minutes or lunch or whatever, I'll sit on this instead of the ground, especially if I'm in snow, because you won't sit on the snow for long until before you realize that it's very cold. The other essential that's not so cheap is this. This is a Garmin InReach. This is a satellite communicator. It is basically a way, so oftentimes in the mountains, there's no cell reception. So if something bad were to happen, you need some way of communicating. This allows you to send and receive text messages that include your location. And it also has a SOS button, so that if something bad happened, you broke your leg, or somebody else hurt themselves, you can hit an SOS, and your location will be transmitted to first responders who will come to find you. It's not cheap. It's a couple $100 for the device itself, and then it's just like any other cell phone where you're going to have a monthly plan, depending on what plan you have. Like the one that I have, I pay like $28 a month. But you know, if you're spending a lot of time in the mountains, I highly recommend that you have one of these, because it gives you the peace of mind, and more importantly, your loved ones the peace of mind that if something were to happen, you can communicate.
Yeah, no, those are definitely handy. Thankfully, I've never had to use one for an emergency, but I've got a bigger one where I can two-way message, and I've used that before.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never, thankfully, knock on wood, had to use it for real either. Just communicating. I have had to use it just in the sense that like a trip is taking longer than I think it was going to take. So I'll just send out a real quick text saying like, "Hey, I'm just running behind because I'm slow. Like everything's fine."
Cool. Well, I think with that, well, I'm going to announce the giveaway winner. So the person who commented and RSVP'd was Lanny Donahoe. So yay, Lanny.
Nice.
You're on my screen, so I can see you. So hi. So we'll get your contact information and get you that print sent out. But the questions we did get were more like one-on-one. So I think we've answered those. We have a couple about mountain gear, but that's actually next month's video session. So if you're desperate to know beforehand, send us another message. And if you could wait a month, we'll be talking about that then for like winter snow gear, all of that sort of stuff. So we'll have another speaker talking about that next month. So Lanny won a print of Nate's, a photo print of Nate's, because he's also an awesome photographer and he's got a website. It is Nate, N-A-T-E-B Brown, BROWN.com. So you can go on there and see his awesome photography and his outdoor project. And he gives 25% of his print sale to the Washington National Park Fund. So we've got all that going on, and we've like AdventureTripr has some new fall trips that we've just launched. So we hope you can take a look at those, but really just go check out Nate's website. He was awesome for doing this for us. He's a cool dude, awesome Instagram, great photographer. And I think that's about it. And yeah, if there's any other questions you guys need, message our social media or send us an email, because we'll answer you there as well if there's something you think about later on. But thanks everyone for joining. We really appreciate having you all here. And thank you, Nate.
Yeah, no problem. And same goes for anyone here. If you have any follow-up questions or anything like that, you can feel free to either hit me up at my website. I have all of my contact information there, whether it be email or social media or anything like that. And I would be free to, or happy to answer any questions.
Cool.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks, Spencer.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was fun.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Oh, and everyone's unmuted if anyone wants to say
Thank you very much.
What was that? I missed that last one. No? Okay. All right, cool. All right, well, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks, Nate.
Guys.
Yeah. Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye, Yannick.